You ever stand up from a chair and feel your legs hesitate for a beat? You might shrug it off and say it is just age or a little tiredness, but that tiny pause can be a quiet warning. It is a whisper from your muscles asking for a bit more care before a bigger problem shows up. I am not here to scare you. I am here to show you 3 foods and a few simple moves that can protect your legs and keep your balance, strength, and confidence. No gym membership required. No expensive equipment. Just small changes you can add to your day. If this sounds familiar, type "I am here" in the comments so others know they are not alone. If you want calm, practical guidance to age with more independence, subscribe and stay with our community. Now let me tell you about Harold, who loved mornings and who started with that same hesitant step. Harold used to be the first on the block to open his front gate and walk the long loop with his dog Rufus. He smelled wet grass and earth on those walks and felt the cool metal of his fence under his palm. Later that spring, he noticed a stiffness when he rose from his kitchen chair. He told his daughter Maria that he felt odd, like the floor was farther than before. Maria frowned and said maybe he should rest more. Harold replied, "I have been resting my whole life and I still love to move." In the kitchen, he could hear the kettle hiss and feel the warmth under his bare feet. One afternoon, he missed a step and Rufus barked loudly. That bark shook him inside. He lied to his neighbor Tom and said it was nothing. Tom put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You should see someone." Harold laughed nervously and said, "Are you talking to me as if I am fragile, Tom?" Tom answered gently, "Harold, we care about your walks, not because we want to watch you worry, but because we want you to keep enjoying them." At the clinic, Dr. Lee asked Harold to stand and walk slowly. Harold described a memory of being on a boat decades ago, feeling the deck tilt under his boots and how steady he had felt. Now his legs felt like they were listening to a different rhythm. The nurse Priya felt his pulse at the ankle and noted a slight change. Harold asked, "Am I losing my strength?" Dr. Lee said, "We call this pattern common, but we can do a lot about it." The smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of the clinic stayed with Harold as he left with a simple plan and a quiet resolve to try. His backstory begins with decades of work as a carpenter, where he lifted beams and carried planks, where his hands remembered the grain of wood and his legs learned to balance on uneven surfaces. He retired into a smaller house but kept active with gardening, building birdhouses, and walking Rufus. Over the years, small injuries and winters of lower activity had added up. He ate modest meals and sometimes skipped protein at breakfast. He tended to avoid stairs and chose chairs with higher backs. That pattern slowly reduced the stimulus his muscles needed to keep their size and strength. He remembered his mother telling him, "If you do not use it, you lose it," and only now did he see the truth in that proverb. His identity was wrapped around being steady and useful, and the idea of losing that independence stirred a quiet worry. That worry made him walk shorter routes and sit through more afternoons. The backstory is as much about a life well lived as it is about small choices that can be adjusted. Harold was ready to do that. Now, a short pause here before we go deeper. If this resonates, I want to invite you to share in the comments. I know many of you have felt a similar hesitation or a cold tingle in your toes. It takes courage to admit it. If you feel it, please write a single short word below, like "I am here" or "my leg." You do not need to explain anything else right now. That small gesture helps others see they are not isolated, and it helps us shape videos that answer the questions you most need. I read each comment and I am moved by them. When you write, I picture Maria calling her father to check in, or Tom bringing over a cup of tea. Your words matter to a community that wants to protect independence with respect. Thank you for being open for a moment. Now, let us understand what might be happening inside the leg when strength fades and what practical steps you can try right away. Sarcopenia is the name given to the gradual loss of muscle that comes with age. Think of muscle like a battery that needs regular charging with movement and good fuel. When activity drops, the body reduces muscle mass to match the lower demand. That reduction makes standing up slower and balance more precarious. It also changes the way blood flows and how oxygen reaches tissues. In plain terms, weaker muscles lead to slower steps and a higher risk of falls, which can be costly to recovery. But the good news is, muscles respond to the right stimulus even later in life. Simple strength moves and added protein in meals signal the body to rebuild. When doctors check for circulation or muscle changes, they may use tests that look at blood pressure differences at the ankle or scans that measure muscle mass. For example, a test called the ankle brachial index compares pressures in the arm and ankle to screen for peripheral arterial disease. It is quick and done with a blood pressure cuff and a small ultrasound probe to listen to. That test helps show whether blood is reaching the legs as it should. Another test called DEXA measures body composition and can estimate lost muscle mass and bone density. These exams help guide decisions and are not scary. They are tools to personalize care and to know when to add a referral to a vascular doctor or a physical therapist. Let us move into practical steps you can do now to begin rebuilding strength. First, try sit-to-stands from a chair. Start with arms for support and aim for 8 to 10 repetitions twice a day. As you gain confidence, try to do them without hands for 1 or 2 sets. Keep feet flat, feel the texture of the floor under your toes, and breathe steadily. Second, try heel raises while holding the back of a chair. Lift your heels slowly, feel the calf tighten, and then lower gently. Do 3 sets of 10 and notice the small burn that tells the muscle it was used. Third, add short walks of 5 to 10 minutes after meals to help circulation. Break them into 2 or 3 short walks if needed. If balance is a worry, stand near a counter or have a family member like Maria or neighbor Tom walk beside you. For beginners, sit and march your legs up and down for 30 seconds to start. The key is consistency and gentle progression. Celebrate 1 extra step, 1 more second standing, 1 additional repetition. Margaret noticed a different set of signs. Her feet felt cold even when the room was warm. She could hear the clock tick in the kitchen and sense the linen of her socks rubbing against her skin. At the clinic, she told Dr. Lee, "I keep finding my toes numb at night." Dr. Lee listened and asked about pain in the calves when she walked. Margaret said it was like a squeezing that made her stop and rest until it eased. In a calm voice, Dr. Lee explained that circulation can be reduced and that inflammation and blocked flow change the signals your legs send. Nurse Priya checked pulses at several points and asked about smoking history and the color of the skin. Margaret sipped tea that tasted faintly of lemon and watched the light through the blinds. She was referred for a vascular check and given advice to include foods that reduce inflammation and to move gently. In the weeks that followed, her neighbor Sarah suggested beet smoothies and simple leg stretches. Margaret felt embarrassed at first and told her daughter Anna, "I do not want to be a burden." Anna squeezed her hand and said, "You are not a burden. You are my mother." Margaret nodded and let the small changes begin. Circulation responds to food choices and to inflammation control. Foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids help reduce vascular inflammation and improve blood flow. Leafy greens supply nitrates, which the body can convert to nitric oxide to relax vessels and help oxygen reach muscles. Beans and legumes offer a mix of protein and fiber that helps maintain muscle and steadies blood sugar. Simple measures like staying hydrated, avoiding long period sitting, and elevating legs briefly after a walk help too. When I mentioned specific exams earlier, such as the ankle brachial index, the practical idea is to screen for blockages that limit blood reaching the feet. The ankle brachial index is non-invasive and compares blood pressure at 2 locations to estimate flow. If results suggest reduced flow, a vascular specialist may recommend lifestyle changes, supervised exercise, or procedures depending on severity. These options are chosen to protect mobility and to reduce pain when walking. John's story shows how fear itself can shrink movement. He used to be a school crossing guard and knew exactly where to plant his feet. After a bad stumble in the grocery store, he began to leave chairs around the house in case he needed to sit. His granddaughter Lily laughed nervously and said, "Grandpa, you have a chair for every room." John said, "I am just being careful." But inside he felt smaller. He heard the scrape of the cart and remembered the cold tile under his shoes. At dinner, his son Paul looked up and said, "Dad, you sound tired of walking." John replied softly, "I am afraid of falling." Paul frowned and suggested a visit to Sarah, the physical therapist, who once helped a friend. At Sarah, he practiced step-ups holding a rail. The first session had 4 exchanges of encouragement and instructions. Sarah said, "Think of each step as a small victory." John whispered, "I do not want to lose my mornings." Sarah replied, "You are not losing them, you are protecting them." They worked on balance drills and on breathing. The air in the therapy room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant, and the mat was textured under his feet. That soon led to a moment of tension when John faced the choice to try alone on his walk. He stood at the door and felt the old fear tighten his chest. In one short paragraph, he remembered the grocery store tile and the sharp surprise of a near fall that taught him caution. In the next paragraph, he imagined walking with Lily and hearing her laugh, and thought that was worth trying. The conflict was raw but decisive. He took 3 small steps with Paul beside him, and each step eased the memory a little. That tension was the turning point. We promised 3 foods, so here they are with concrete ways to use them. First, oily fish such as salmon or sardines. Benefit: omega-3 fatty acids, which reduce inflammation and support circulation and muscle repair. How to use: bake a small salmon fillet twice a week. Flake on warm salads, or mix canned sardines with lemon and olive oil for a quick protein boost. Myth busted: you do not need to eat enormous portions to get benefit. Small servings regularly matter more than one large meal. Second, beans and legumes, such as lentils, chickpeas, and black beans. Benefit: plant-based protein, fiber, and slow-release energy to support muscle and steady blood sugar. How to use: add a half cup of cooked beans to soups, salads, or make a simple hummus spread to enjoy with whole grain crackers. Myth busted: beans will not make you bloated if you introduce them gradually and soak or rinse canned beans. Third, leafy greens and beets. Benefit: natural nitrates and vitamins that support vessel relaxation and oxygen delivery. How to use: blend spinach or beetroot in a morning smoothie, add a handful of greens to omelets, or roast beets with a touch of olive oil and vinegar. Myth busted: you need fancy juices. Simple cooked greens and whole beets provide lasting nutrients. Combine these foods with small strength moves and short walks, and you create a pattern that signals muscles and vessels to stay active. To summarize, start with a simple routine. Do 2 sessions a day of sit-to-stands and heel raises at a comfortable pace. Add a short walk after meals and include small servings of oily fish twice a week, beans or legumes most days, and leafy greens daily. Check with your clinician if you have sudden swelling, severe leg pain, open sores, or marked color change. Share a quick note in the comments for the community with a small victory like, "I stood without support today." If you want calm, evidence-based guidance and stories that respect your experience, subscribe and join our group. Now, here is the promised epilogue with real-time snapshots of progress. 1 month later, Harold could feel a change in the morning. He still noticed some hesitancy, but it was shorter. He increased his sit-to-stands from 8 to 12 and began leaving the high-backed chair for a lower kitchen stool to challenge himself gently. Maria noticed him walking to the mailbox and coming back without leaning on the porch rail. He measured the distance of his usual loop and added 1 extra block. He recorded in a little notebook that on 3 mornings he felt less stiffness, and that made him say out loud to Rufus, "I can do this." The caregiver Paul, who helped on weekends, commented that Harold seemed more cheerful. Dr. Lee sent a supportive message saying, "Keep up the consistency." These small numbers mattered because they were real steps out of avoidance. 3 months later, Margaret reported smaller changes that added up. Her toes were less frequently numb, and she could walk to the park for 10 continuous minutes where she watched children play. She cooked a simple salmon tray bake twice a week and noted that her energy after lunch lasted longer. Anna joined 2 of her walks and they talked more. The vascular nurse, Priya, reviewed her ankle pressures and found modest improvement with lifestyle changes. Margaret now measured her walks. and recorded a modest increase from 5 to 15 minutes 3 times per week. Her confidence grew, so she planted new herbs in the window box and felt proud of small accomplishments. Neighbors Sarah and Tom celebrated with a homemade lentil stew. 6 months later, John returned to a familiar independence. He could cross the street with a steady pace, and the fear that once tightened his chest had loosened. He still practiced balance drills with Sarah twice a week, and he met Lily at the park for a short play watch that made him laugh out loud. He had incorporated beans into lunches and noticed that his knees felt less tired when he climbed stairs. His family recorded simple measures they could point to: 12 more steps without needing to pause, and 2 extra minutes on the morning walk. His physiotherapist, Sarah, noted improved gait symmetry, and his primary care doctor documented stable vitals and a better exercise tolerance. Together, they planned a slow progression of strength training and community walks to maintain these gains. That planning gave him and his family a sense of control and hope. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this small truth: tiny actions repeated become protection. Start with a sit to stand, add a handful of beans, cook a simple piece of salmon, and walk a little more than yesterday. Tell us one small victory in the comments, and subscribe to keep building with others. Your legs are not a countdown to loss. They are tools for your next steps. Keep walking one confident step at a time.